You are listening to the official podcast of the Mutual UFO Network.
Welcome once again to the official MUFON podcast. I'm Richard Beckwith. Tonight, we're joined by a man whose meticulous research may compel us to re-examine a cornerstone of American history, our journey into space. Our guest is Ed Wilson, an independent investigator, researcher, historian, and curator of the Simpkinson NASA Archive. Ed's work culminates in his groundbreaking new book, Under Our Nose, How the Simpkinson UFO Led to Confirmation of Strange Craft in NASA Archives, and a formal report he has submitted to the U.S. House Committee on Oversight and Accountability. Ed's investigation zeroes in on the Gemini XI mission, a critical early step in NASA's manned spaceflight program. Through advanced forensic image analysis, including Fourier domain filtering and AI-assisted comparisons, he presents what he describes as scientifically validated evidence of visual image tampering in an official NASA photograph, S6654585. This anomaly, Ed contends, is consistent with a masked or erased lenticular object, a strange craft, that also appears in an unnumbered NASA lithograph, famously dubbed the Simpkinson UFO. But this is more than just a single image. Drawing on a painstaking review of over 16,000 original NASA photographic frames and crucial historical documents, Ed Wilson argues that the public record of our space program may not be the complete record. He suggests a system of concealment, where critical information, including visual evidence of unexplained phenomena, may have been withheld from the public for decades. Inspired by his father's lifelong principle to think scientifically, Ed Wilson is now challenging Congress to conduct a formal, unbiased inquiry into these astonishing claims. His findings, backed by verifiable data, could fundamentally change our understanding of early space exploration and the secrets that still orbit our collective knowledge. Join us as Ed Wilson and his assistant Seth Lamancusa share the incredible details of his investigation, the profound implications of his discoveries, and his unwavering pursuit of truth. Ed and Seth, welcome to the MUFON podcast.
Thanks, Richard. It's just great to be here with you today. Really been looking forward to it.
I've been looking forward to this.
I've looked at a lot of your videos, and you're the perfect person to help us out on our quest for some knowledge. So we're very pleased to be here today.
Well, I'm very happy that you are here, and I've been looking forward to it as well. As a kid, I remember being extremely interested in the Gemini missions. I was just fascinated with space and astronauts and all that sort of thing. I was born in 1960, and so when all of this was taking place, I was 6 years old. And before we get going, we need to talk to Seth. How are you, Seth?
I'm doing well. How are you, Richard?
I'm really good. I'm glad you're here with us, Seth. So,
thanks.
I always thought about it, and I don't know if you guys remember these action figures, but when I was a little boy, we had these things called Major Matt Mason, and it was like they were little action figures. They were about 6 inches tall, and they had space helmets, and they had and they were made by Mattel. And I just had these things all over. I was just absolutely fascinated with space and with going to the moon, and I can remember watching that in 1969. But I also always had a real fascination with otherworldly kinds of things. And that's kind of what you accidentally got yourself into, right, Ed? I mean, with in particular, Gemini 11, and the book that you wrote, Under Our Nose. And it essentially chronicles the Gemini 11 flight and some of the strange things that happened during that flight and some of the strange images that were captured. So, can you give us an idea about how Under Our Nose came about?
I sure can. And I'm glad you brought up the nostalgia there. I've got 5 years on you, Richard. When this Gemini 11 mission took place in 1966, I was 11 years old. So we had not the action figures, but instead a television program back then called Star Trek. And there might not be a lot of people out there. I'm finding out I'm growing older by the minute who've ever heard of Star Trek. But one of the things that tickled me about this archive, and it's a NASA archive, is that in the Star Trek serial, one of the main characters was the engineer, the chief engineer. And his name was Scotty, believe it or not. And one of the famous lines is when Captain Kirk would say, "Beam me up, Scotty." And what tickles me so much, and it's just a coincidence, or maybe not, is the fact that Scott Simpkinson was known to all his friends at NASA as Scotty. I've read over 60 different biographies, or I should say the NASA recordings, 2-hour interviews with all the earliest NASA employees, and they're always referring to Scotty over and over again as the go-to guy, just like it was in Star Trek. But
now,
what happened?
Elaborate, Ed, on who Scott Simpkinson is, and elaborate if you can. I'm sure you're probably getting ready to anyway. To
Yeah,
elaborate
sure.
on the Simpkinson lithograph. And if you
Yes.
would also explain to our younger audience what a lithograph is.
Sure. To start with, let me tell you what I am. I'm not a UFO expert, okay, or at least I wasn't. I find now, after a couple of years of intensive research, that I'm getting pretty good and knowing my way around the field. What I am is I'm an historian, and I'm a rare book and document dealer. So for the last 25 years, I've gone to auctions around the country and bought rare books and rare documents, and I would buy them at local auctions, and I've sold them worldwide. Many of the books and drawings and diagrams and artifacts that I've collected are in museums around the world. So I've been pretty successful at it, just because really what I am is I'm a book aficionado. Rare books, that's me. While I was doing my business, I found an auction just north of Mount Vernon, where I am, and up around Cleveland, where Lewis Airfield was, and where now Lewis NASA Field is. At that little auction, they had an archive called the Emily Ertl Archive, and the documents are in the book. And Emily Ertl was a secretary at NASA. At least that's what they knew at first, and that's how they advertised it. Emily, as it turns out, is the very first female employee at NASA. And you can look actually on the back cover of the first book, and you will notice that picture right there. That is not NASA. That is the Space Task Group. The Space Task Group, after the Russians launched the Sputnik and we were behind, they created the Space Task Group to try and catch up. It was a horrible, horrible time for America. There was a lot of doubt as to whether we would be able to compete in this world of space. So they created the Space Task Group, and the guy you saw right in the center was Scott Simpkinson, and right next to him was Emily Ertl, his life partner. What happened was I went to the auction, and because I know the prices of a lot of these items, I knew that this was something that I wanted to have because I make my living doing rare documents, rare photographs. So I purchased 30-some black ring binders. What nobody knew at the time was it was not the Emily Ertl archive secretary. It was her live-in boyfriend, Scott Simpkinson's archive. Scott Simpkinson is the guy who put the very first Mercury capsule into space, the Big John. He worked in all the Mercury program. He was the main engineer in the Gemini program. You can see there's all kinds of beautiful photography where they show him in the original control room that he built for the first Mercury program. That was built by him, and he's sitting there and he's controlling the whole process. These guys from the Space Task Group in 1959 in NASA became the foundation, or the engineering foundation, for NASA. Now, the other half of the NASA Foundation came, of course, from Virginia. And many of you will remember the one about counting numbers, or where they had the calculators. So there were two aspects of the program. The engineering aspect came from those guys right there in Cleveland. And they built stuff like that first Mercury capsule that you saw in the picture I just showed you. I went and I bought the archive, 30-some volumes, 564 original NASA photos. And these original NASA photos were all kept in archival folders. They are in very wonderful condition. They're beautiful. They cover all the Mercury program, which is what's in this book. They cover all the Gemini program. And then, of course, they covered the Apollo program. So 564 images plus all kinds of documents, unbelievable stacks of beautiful documents. Now, as a historian, this stuff drives me crazy with joy. I love it. I'll read it and eat it up. And it was doing, and one of the things that I know as a historian, and it's different from what other people might like, is when it comes to the photographs, the Apollo photographs and the landing on the moon are the commercially successful photographs. Everybody wants those. I sold approximately 200 of those photographs down with the world's greatest space auction house, Heritage. And more of these items will be coming up there later. And they brought over $80,000. So these are rare, rare photos. I've kept the Mercury one because they're not as commercially viable. But you know what? I'm a historian. The photographs in this book, the Mercury program, cannot be found anywhere else. This is the guy who built the program. She is the secretary who put it all together. The newspaper archive is a couple hundred pages of clipped out newspaper articles, archivally kept also. That's because this happened. It's hard for people to understand how very primitive we were back then. We didn't have the internet. We were unable to get communications across the ocean. There were no TV shows from Europe until I think about 64 or something. They had a 50-minute Olympics breach with the first Telstar satellite. These things were not available then. And when you look at these rockets, you'll see they're carrying these space capsules. The pictures in the book are on the back of tow trucks. And not only are the space capsules being transported on tow trucks, but the tow trucks have two-piece front windshields. We didn't have the technology to build a one-piece windshield. So these were primitive times. And there are newspaper articles in there, and many people today, I just realized how old I am, don't even know what a special edition is. Some of these Gemini or some of the Mercury program orbits were only 3 orbits. Only 3 orbits, John Glenn. But we didn't have the internet. There was no way of communicating. If you watch an old movie, kids, you'll see something out there. You'll see a newsboy standing on the street, and he's going, extra, extra, read all about it. Well, the reason is because there was no instant communication. The best we could do was the local newspapers would run an extra edition. You'll see an example of it in the books when you look at the newspaper archives. There's a Miami Press, John Glenn enters orbit, orbit 1 complete. Then there's another edition, 90 minutes later, John Glenn completes orbit number 2. These were different times.
Now, Ed, there was as you're going through this, these archives, and you're establishing the provenance of the archives and the importance of the individuals who had to do with the images that you had obtained. And so there was one particular image, though, wasn't there, that drew your interest as you started to go through these archives that just sort of stood out to you for some reason. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, you're absolutely more than stood out. It jumped out and grabbed me by my throat. You may remember back in the early days when the Ohio State University radar telescope was being utilized to try and find the very first UFO signals. There was something that they found called the wow signal. And it was The radio telescope had locked onto a signal from outside the solar system, and they could not believe it. This was what they were looking for signs of intelligence. And the astronomer wrote right beside it, wow. Wow, that very simply understated, but wow. I did the same thing. When I came to the very last page of the Gemini 11 binder, after carefully cataloging every single photographic number that I've been through by the hundreds already, my eyes opened wide. And the very last page was the lithograph. The lithograph showed exactly what you have right there. This is a rendition of what is inside that book. That is the actual image of the lithograph. It shows the actual saucer there. It shows the Earth, the cloud structure. I could not believe it. I thought this has got to be fake. In fact, I thought it was such a fake thing that I was trying to eat a turkey sandwich while I was doing it. I pulled it out. I said, this has got to be fake. So what looks like an asteroid's tail on there is actually a little bit of mayonnaise. So when you go to analyze it, we have the huge amounts of testing done on it. And that's what that is. That was my unbelievable luck in finding it and not believing my own eyes. So yes, I was astonished.
But there were problems with the image, wouldn't you agree, in the beginning, because people wrote it off as some kind of, because there weren't any frames before or afterwards, apparently, that showed the same object or showed anything that would indicate there was something out there. But there was also something happening during the mission at about the same time, where the astronauts were seeing something outside the capsule. Can you elaborate on any of that?
Yes, well, I was intrigued and my curiosity was piqued when I saw it, and I knew the quality of this gentleman, and I also knew a little bit about the legalities involved in making a fake reproduction that matches exactly the format found in the mission report. The 546-page mission report for the Gemini 11 mission uses that exact same format. I went through and I double-checked all the NASA print. It matches up. It's a match, and it's illegal for them to make a little joke if they were going to do that. Plus, I knew a little bit about the character of this gentleman. This was not a joke.
Around the time that we suspect this picture was taken, we're not certain when it was taken, but around the time we suspect the picture was taken, the astronauts were continuously commenting on strange encounters with objects flying past their space shuttle, saying things like, what was that darn thing? They're saying their battery fails. They're saying, did something go by your window there? They're saying there's something real shiny there, something moving straight down the scope on our left. What was that flashed and went by? Oh, there's another one. They're saying, oh, look, there's one of them. Look at that. What is that? What? That on our left just passed over us.
We have the actual voice transcripts from each page in the book, so that you can look at them for yourself and observe.
And isn't there a period of silence after that?
That's what it came. It didn't dawn on me. I was trying to find just one voice transcript. I found 6 of them. There are 5 instances, or 6 instances, where the astronauts mention encounters with something unknown. And I was thinking that one of these has to be the one that this image was taken in. I didn't realize that it was a whole bunch more. Richard Haynes, the head of NARCAP, the founder of NARCAP, was kind enough to contribute his article, which you will see at the very end of the book, about a Chilean UFO that matches ours, very similar. And he pointed out to me that there are certain things to look for in the voice transcripts that tell you that a strange encounter has taken place. And one of those is a strange gap in the communication failure. As it turns out, we got into the very first instance after Richard Haynes had expressed to me that you look for a voice gap. So what is it, Seth? What is that page I told you about here? There we go. Here it is, right here.
It's like 6 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, 34.
There's a 6-minute gap that you're referring to. He's saying it's a I don't know exactly the page. I think he found it.
There we go, right here. It's page 34.
Hour 54, 46 minutes. 6 minutes of silence, directly followed by one of the astronauts asking, "Is the tape recorder on?" there's also evidence from the previous Gemini 10 mission transcript that NASA occasionally censors their transcripts after they get back down to the ground. So I don't know if that's exactly what happened here, but it fits kind of a narrative.
What I determined and what I've done in the research is that I found that right after the tether experiment, where they did the artificial gravity experiment, where they hooked up to the Gemini capsule and they rotated the capsules around each other to create artificial gravity. As soon as they unhooked from that, they started the D15 experiment. The D15 experiment was the very first orthocon tube television experiment.
First TV in space.
First TV in space. The reason was because an orbit normally takes approximately 90 minutes to go around the Earth. In that period of time, 45 minutes is in daylight and 45 minutes is, of course, in darkness. And with all the visuals that they want to get and perhaps some of the surreptitious filming they want to do, the human eye takes a full 20 minutes of absolute darkness before it acclimates itself to maximum vision. So when they go into a nighttime orbit, they're, for all intents and purposes, mostly blind. We don't have the night vision of animals with a reflective surface. We have to wait until the pupils dilate. That's 20 minutes. That only leaves 20 minutes approximately of visual acute vision on the night side. The orthocon experiment was a specialized night vision camera in order that they may look into a tube and do navigation, and of course any surreptitious spying that they want to do also using that. It was a successful mission. They deployed it through a periscope in the bottom of the space capsule, and the mission started. The D15 RCA camera orthocon tube experiment started within minutes of them unhooking the tether from the artificial gravity experiment.
Start time 54 hours.
So again, what you're doing here, Ed, is you're following the trail that, at the beginning of which the trailhead is this lithograph that you obtained from the archive that you purchased. And so now you're trying to find out, well, what is the provenance of this lithograph? And are there any other pieces of evidence gathered during the Gemini 11 mission that would corroborate the existence of what apparently is an object in this image? And that's where this D15 experiment comes in. And this is the D15 RCA footage. And
yes, the trail, as I see it so far, is onto the lithograph, reads through the transcript in the mission report, and finds that the astronauts are commenting on these anomalies outside their window. It's worth noting, along the lines of evidence potentially corroborating the existence of an anomalous object outside their window, that there was footage. Obviously, this D15 experiment, they put the first TV camera recorder in space. They recorded footage with that recorder, footage that has not, up until Ed requested it from the National Archive, been publicly available. Now, he has meticulously gone over this footage, and we found within it a number of frames bearing, frankly, a striking resemblance to the Simpkinson object.
16,000 frames is what we got from them.
Not all of them bearing a resemblance to the Simpkinson object, but several of them displaying small, distant strings of lights that are very difficult to write off as camera refractions or lens flares.
And
yeah,
the
other thing, let me just stop right here because I don't want to forget this. This is important. As the mission takes over, when they turn the camera on, they see it. They say, "What's that? What's over our head? Did you see that?" He says, "No." And the other pilot says, "No, let's turn around." He says, "No, let's not turn around. Let's keep going." And then within a minute of them seeing that and announcing it, NASA comes on and says to him, "Please check your 2C stack." And they checked the 2C stack. I didn't know at the time until later research showed that the 2C stack was the battery. The electromagnetic effects that happen often with UFOs, we find, even if a car on the ground, is that the battery will die. That's a common characteristic of an encounter with the UFO. The 2C stack absolutely burned out to zero. So NASA pointed them in within 1 minute of them sighting the UFO, and that's when we found out that the battery had gone dead. It was only one of the series of batteries. They had backups. But so we had the electromagnetic effect that killed that battery within 1 minute of them sighting the craft. And then within a minute of that, there's a 6-minute gap in the transcripts, voice transcripts. So we don't hear what happens after that. So that's exactly what Richard Haynes said I was to look for.
But we have some simultaneous experiments taking place at the same time that involve the obtaining of images with a couple of different cameras. And you just mentioned, I want to make sure our audience understands this, that you retrieved, at least from the RCA series, 16,000 frames. And
yes.
so you went frame by frame through each of those 16,000 frames and found some corroborating frames, but you also found some other interesting things, and that would be some evidence of tampering with the images themselves.
Yes, we found some. There's one of the frames. That's one of the 16,000 frames. Look at the strange pattern of lights there. One of the things that people always thought, and I thought too, when you look at the lithograph itself, you look at the portholes. I'll call them portholes for no other reason. A lot of everyone out there immediately wrote the lithograph off because they said, well, for God's sakes, look at those portholes. They're uneven. I mean, they look like they're glued on, and it looks like part of them are falling off. And I'm speaking about the portholes right here. Well, that's immediately was dismissed. The problem is this. We don't know what those portholes are. And we don't know if there's some kind of propulsion system. We don't know if those are plasma lights. But you can see they are uneven. And what we found in this D15 frame footage right there is a match that through computer analysis shows that that is the exact reliable configuration of those strange lights there. So what was initially determined to be proof of being a hoax actually is proof that we don't know what those things are. We don't know what they should look like. Yes, if you have a 9-year-old kid drawing a picture of the UFO that he saw, he's going to draw the windows equidistant and stuff. But we have instances here where what you actually have matches the lithograph.
And so you have instruments that are simultaneously capturing the same configuration of glows, regardless of whether they appear to be uneven or not. They actually provide somewhat of a fingerprint to correlate one image with the other, or in this case, how many images were you able to gather through your investigation that corroborated the first lithograph, and where did you get those images from in addition to...
We probably got 5 really good images that match in the D15 footage. That's all from the D15 footage. And they're taken from different periods, too, and they're different methodologies. And then we also found in the NASA red number photos, the Mauer camera. So we have a wonderful image of when you expand it and look at it, it looks like a Frisbee. And the lights on the edge of the Frisbee are right there, and it's right at the same time. In fact, it's while they're still tethered to the Agena capsule. So it's just probably the very first image of that UFO, but nobody realized it. The picture that it's in is taken through the command pilot's window. His window, believe it or not, was absolutely disgusting, filthy. He couldn't even see out of it. The poor man went into space, excited to be out there. On one of the EVAs, he begged to let him go out and clean the window off.
And this is Pete Conrad. This is Pete Conrad, right?
Yes, yeah. Right. And then he said, please let him go out and clean it off. Well, it was actually, they determined later that the defroster cable that goes in between the triple pane windows had a glue on it, and that glue would deteriorate in the vacuum and heat of space, and that's what ruined his window. So that right there in the Mauer camera, you see just the same light configuration, and it's not edge on. You can see it's a saucer shape. That's the Mauer configuration in the actual NASA photo that we provide that information for you to look at. And we also run some experiments on it, matching it to the lithograph. Then we found the very important 5 photographs from the Hasselblad camera that occurred as soon as they unhooked from the tether. And recently we just found a movie that shows the exact same things. I believe it's SS 58584 is the first in the series of 5 photographs. They were taken as a public service announced, or a public service photo that they wanted to use to show the Agena and the tether floating in space. They're all, I found out through later research, the space capsule's leaving at about 9 feet per second. That shows up in the movie. And the interesting thing is, Richard Underwood, the guy who did all these photographs, knew exactly the second of the mission, the minute, the hour, the second of every single photograph. These 5 photographs are missing all that metadata. Now, all the photos that you will want to look at after a Freedom of Information Act, where I wanted to get some NASA photographs, they got out of the business. The Arizona State University Archive now handles high-definition scans of all NASA's early photos. NASA no longer has anything to do with that. They put it off to the Arizona State University. You go there, and you can observe all of these images that are in the book. And it's not anything that we've made up. You can expand those, and you can look with your own eyes. Just expand in those photos on the UFOs that are depicted in the book.
Ed,
and it's not anything we've done.
Can we talk a little bit about the different cameras that we've been talking about? Because we've referred to a couple of different things here. We've talked about, or at least the image sources, we've talked about the lithograph, we've talked about the D15 RCA camera, and we've talked about the Hasselblad camera and images taken from those. Can you explain the difference between those two cameras and their purpose for our audience, so they understand what kind of images were captured and why we had 2 completely different kinds of cameras or more on the mission?
Yes. As I said, with the loss of night vision, the orthicon tube television camera was designed to do astronomical observations. In the mission report, you can see actually 3 numbered photographs from that experiment that are not listed anywhere else in NASA. So when you go into the mission statement, there's a listing of every single photograph and the number from each camera that there is. Well, there's a discrepancy. I think it's about 40 photos that are listed in the Gemini, in the mission report, but they're not observable anywhere in the record. So you can actually see missing numbers. They're right in the mission report. The book brings those pictures out, and you can see the constellations that are in it. So there are 3 cameras. So the night vision camera for astronomical observation, plus also for observing on the Earth on the dark side. That's what the RCA camera was for. The Hasselblad camera, of course, was used for everything from spy pictures, or as they call it, I forget the word they use, just basically pictures of the surface of the Earth, wide terrain views. And then the Maurer camera also was an automatic camera. And I'm not really certain why the Maurer was different. I know they both used the same kinds of film, 70 millimeter film, but perhaps there are some minor differences. For instance, a lot of times the black and white photos and the black and white lithograph was converted from color film used in those cameras, specifically because, as Richard Underwood, who of course was a master photographic interpreter, who read the U-2, he worked for the U-2 spy planes. They would put it in black and white because the stark contrast between black and white allowed you to detect whether you're looking at a missile silo or a barn silo on the Earth. So,
and the Maurer camera.
The Maurer camera. So you've got the Maurer camera, you've got the Hasselblad camera, you've got the RCA D15 camera. All 3 of those have captured images that you can see on the lithograph. And of course, the big triumph of the piece is, and you just can't deny it when you see it for yourself. We have overlaid the image of the lithograph on S66 54585. That's a red number photograph, and it matches exactly the lower right-hand corner of that NASA image. Matches exactly.
I think it's important for our audience to understand that not only does it match exactly in that particular manner, but you also subjected that particular frame, S66 54585 to a battery of different tests to correlate it with the lithograph. Can you elaborate on that?
Exactly. You'll find 5 experiments in the back of the book. Now, these are AI experiments. I don't know, just by coincidence last night, Travis Taylor, who was kind enough to contribute to the image that you see on page 555 of the book, did a 20-page analysis of the lithograph for us. Travis last night was once again going over on his Skinwalker Ranch television show some of the evidence they found of photo tampering on the Skinwalker Ranch from 1962 1969, and he used the exact same programs that we use on ChatGPT for, and they're able to. One thing they do, of course, I have all kinds of problems with hallucinations. Who doesn't? Okay, but you can work your way around it through diligence and making sure you use the right parameters, and you could get good evidence. So basically, Travis was able to determine that there is actually jetsam floating in the space of the lithograph that is not present in the NASA photo. And that made him, Seth brought up to me, Seth was the one that pointed out to me, well, Ed, suppose they just photoshopped that UFO onto that S665585. And that's when I reviewed Travis Taylor's work on the lithograph, where he points out that there is debris floating in the lithograph field. And that's where Travis Taylor says, hey, this, and the photograph at least is genuine because that's debris floating out there. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say, that debris is not in S665585. The debris is not there. Hence, it cannot be the segment, even though it matches perfectly. The cloud structure absolutely perfectly matches. It can't be used to do the photoshopping on it. So somewhere in that series, within 90 seconds of that photograph at 665585, at the tremendous speed of the Mercury capsule, of the Gemini capsule circling the globe, that picture, that cloud pattern has to have been taken within 90 seconds. It's either 45 seconds before or 45 seconds later. We've done some testing on the arc of the Earth, measuring the arc capture, the curvature of the arc, and there's evidence that there is a missing frame in that series. Mm-hmm. Plus, on top of that, you take into consideration the fact that the metadata is missing. They didn't even want to know what orbit that happened or what time that happened. They wanted to keep that as secret as possible to prevent investigation.
Mm-hmm. And I want to get, I don't want to get too far afield here because I want the audience to understand.
You have to keep me in check. I can't have helped myself. Everybody, I apologize. I want y'all to understand, not only is that book about 680 pages of data, but I had to throw out a good 500 pages of data. That's also stuck in my mind just to get the thing down so I could afford
understand. I want to get back to the kind of tests that you conducted on S66545585, and I'll list about for you because I have a list here of the different tests, and maybe you can elaborate on the ones that hit you because I'm looking at a series of about 8 or 9 tests here, and so we're looking at the FFT frequency analysis, AI denoising and reconstruction, pixel noise and brightness stats, soothing and blur analysis, reintroduced noise signature, side-by-side visual match, gradient edge pattern check. And so these are all pretty sophisticated authentication methods, and you're using this to essentially connect again the frames that you've obtained from the actual mission archives to the lithograph that you obtained in the...
Exactly right, Richard. You're exactly right. That's what we did. We tried to do it. There's a total of 14 different photographic analysis tests that we used and tried to use it on all 5 of the reports. There are more images than I can possibly do. I'm an old man and it's not my field of forte. My whole purpose here is to get you and your audience involved on verifying that the facts we've found are genuine.
It's worth noting that these tests were assisted by ChatGPT. It's just a remarkable tool.
Yes, and then one thing ChatGPT is good at is doing comparisons. There's all kinds of hallucination problems. I have problems with it too. I signed up on ChatGPT when it first came out, and the very first question I asked ChatGPT, she got wrong. Okay, so I
That's
couldn't believe it.
that's
If
been
it was
my
not what I
experience with
thought.
AI. That's been my experience with AI because I'm an attorney and so we do have AI at our disposal in our office, and we have a little bit more sophisticated library tools. But I find that AI is actually quite often wrong, and you can't just simply rely on what AI. But
You
when
have
you
to
but
check her and check her and check her, don't you?
just one of it's just one of many tools. But let's get to the crux of the matter, which is that you got this image initially from this archive and that you purchased, and it led you down this rabbit hole trying to find out where it came from and to corroborate whether or not this image was actually taken during the Gemini 11 mission. It seemed to correlate with some of the conversations that the astronauts were having. There's a 6-minute span of time where there's absolutely nothing in the transcript. It seems like if you were to just look at it from the outside, people are kind of freaking out a little bit, thinking like, "What are we going to do? There's a UFO right outside the capsule. How are we gonna keep this under wraps?" And so not only did they alter some of the images, but they kept some of the images out, and they also and this opens up a much bigger picture here. A much bigger question is, well, what does that say about some of the other information that NASA has gathered over the years? I mean, doesn't this speak to a potential pattern of behavior?
Let's put it this way, Richard. If all of the momentum the disclosure is gaining with Congress, with former government whistleblowers, with former defense contractors means anything, then I don't see how our country's infamous space agency, NASA, wouldn't have known something about the UFO phenomenon before 2017 when the story broke.
Last summer's hearing with Mike Gold, as you recall, I tried to get in touch with Mike so well. Mike had done a little bit of, we had been in contact with Mike. I don't think I've got anything published in the first book by him, but he was an incredibly cooperative gentleman and put us in contact with some other people who could help us. Mike Gold's last hearing, his big message that I got from what he was saying was, we need to go through all the Gemini photographic archives and look for evidence, which is what I have done. And that's what I was trying to get in touch with him to explain. Using these methodologies that we now have with artificial intelligence, you can more or less pick out exactly where there are errors or deceptions in the original photos. And another thing that's most important, we haven't even touched base on the guy who set up the entire NASA photographic system, Richard Underwood. Richard Underwood set this system up to be deceptive. It was set up to be deceptive, and I'm not against that, and there's not anything wrong with that. This world's a horrible place. Thankfully, I've not had to fight any wars, but they're going on today, and lives are at stake. And these guys risk their lives in order to try and preserve some semblance of sanity in our little country too.
Tell our audience who Richard Underwood is.
Richard Underwood is yes, and Richard Underwood started out working, and he's an amazing guy. He was loading ammo for the Seabees back during the World War II and Korean War. He got out, he got his degree in geology, and he continued to work for the, well, I guess you'd have to say the CIA. He ended up working on flights, U-2 flights, analyzing the photographs from U-2 flights. What happened was just a fantastic story. I love guys like this because these guys, Corso, do you ever read Corso? Corso, the little Colonel Corso came out there. He went to the CIA boss's office, pulled his revolver out, slammed it on the table and said, if your guy follows me anymore tomorrow, you won't have him again. These guys are about business. This is not a thing for little guys like me to be involved with. Richard Underwood was the same way. He was working for the CIA. They were down in Guatemala, and he came back from a flight. And when he came back from the flight, there on the tarmac was a beautiful young foreign woman, a Guatemalan. And he fell in love and he married her. Well, he was an analyst for the spy photographs that they were doing down there. And it's quoted in, these are the oral archives starting in 1996. These guys were dying off. And unfortunately, Scott Simpkinson died in 1996 before they could do his oral archive. And they were telling exactly what they did during those years at the formation of NASA. And Underwood met his girl, fell in love with her, and he had a general pull him aside and tell him, and this is in the transcripts, I'm not making this up, I should take you out and have you shot right now as a traitor to your country, all because he married a foreign girl. These guys are serious, and I'm glad they're serious because it's a serious world that we live in.
They demoted him because they found out that he was...
because he married her, they put him on the B-17 flights. They took him away from the U-2, and he flew he did 4,000 hours of missions with them, and is deaf in one ear, all because of that. What I liked is after the guy threatened his life, he comes back in 2000 when he does his 2-hour interview, and he says, and I'm still married to her today. And our kids just graduated from college down here in Houston. So I love a little guy like that says, yanny, yanny, yanny.
Well, but I agree with your assessment, Ed, and which is, there are certain secrets that have to be maintained, and this is a point that I've made myself, that, in a dangerous world like the one that we live in, you can't let all the secrets out. You can't have anything close to what you might call complete transparency or total transparency, because your country would be wiped off the face of the earth in a week if you just opened up all the files and let everybody in. But, of course.
And I'll note here regarding the U2 program, one of the mechanisms by which intelligence concealed the U2 program from Congress for a long time was via loopholes in the defense reporting mechanisms. It was kept unclassified. And Richard Underwood flew these U2s naturally. Now, after one of these U2s was shot down by Russia, they had to divulge everything, and Congress found out about the illegal concealment of the program by Lockheed Martin and our defense agencies. But what's interesting is that the Gemini, the Simpkinson archive lithograph has the word unclassified printed on it. So it's possible that they utilized a similar kind of loophole in order to keep it.
One of the ways they can keep things secret is by not classifying it.
Yes, so, precisely.
But just burying it in some file somewhere where no one would even think or bother to look, because why would anybody look in a bunch of old, dusty, unclassified files?
That's roughly how they kept OSAP, or whatever they were calling it back in 2007, from Congress and from the public up until 2017, when Keene and Blumenthal reported on it, was by putting it. It was like a white. I forget what they called it, but it was on the books. It was on the defense spending budgets. Nobody looked at them because those things are hundreds of pages long, and who's reading them line by line? But it was all in there, and nobody knew that the government had reestablished their UFO investigation unit at all, and yet it was unclassified.
So Freedom of Information Acts that I did a lot of Freedom of Information Acts trying to track down this information through the various departments. Colonel Carl Nell was a great help when he expressed exactly part of the deception that occurred. You have to understand that secret documents have gone through a metamorphosis through the history of the country and the military. Originally, a classified document meant that anything done by the military was a classified document. And because it was a classified document, Congress had a right to look at it. So they had to work their way around it by doing things that were unclassified, and then they came up with a new category called SBU, sensitive but unclassified. So there's a whole metamorphosis of terms that spycraft uses to keep these things from basically from Congress.
I really I appreciate that, Ed, because this is my area. And when you told me that they keep a lot of things classified by not classifying them, that it sort of hit me like a little chill went up my spine, and it sort of hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, that's brilliant.
It is.
I mean, but again, it leads to a larger question, which is, people that are looking for things like this, where would they look, Ed? And I guess, for someone like you, the answer would probably be anywhere where you can find, documents and archives. Just start rooting through them and see what you find.
Wonderful question.
There is no shortage of documents.
Wonderful question. First of all, and then I'm being real brief here, but I'm going to answer that exact and give you some details of what you and everybody out there can do to participate in furthering all these investigations. This is from the Gemini mission report, 546 pages. For 12 years, this was kept classified from 1966 to 1978. The one mission report alone is 523 pages. Okay. These copies that I'm going to show you are just 2 pages of copies that are found from page 505 to 523 at the rear of the book. The mission report was classified. Because it was classified, you had to keep track of every single copy of the mission report that you printed up. There were no computers at that time. So this one report alone from October of 1966 consists of 577 total copies that they made. They had to know where each one of those copies went. They went to 188 different offices. These include government offices, and these also include corporate offices and departments that we don't yet know what these addresses have to do. And here's the other thing. This report was generated, and that was the Gemini 11 mission. And that report had to be out and analyzed by every single one of these 511 copies. Every company out there, they had to analyze the report and look at the ramifications before the Gemini 12 flight, which took place within 30 days. The total amount of pages in that report and getting it to all these people is 301,771 pages. It's 300,000 just for the one report. That doesn't include the technical debriefing. That doesn't include any of the other documents, such as the voice transcripts. All these had to be reviewed before the next mission. That was the purpose of this report. It's an engineering status report that they need to have so that they can make any corrections all within 30 days. The breakneck pace of this is absolutely amazing.
So Ed, before we move on, I want to clarify that now when you talk about the book, we're talking about under our nose. Under your nose?
No, I'm talking about, this is actually, what's this book? This is actually the Simpkinson Archive UFO. Okay. The 2 books were written a year apart. The first book, basically, the Simpkinson Archive UFO, brings up all the provenance, all the hunt for voice transcripts, all the photographic evidence, all the mission reports, all the technical debriefings where the things are mentioned. All of those things are done in that 600-page book. And then generally what was determined in that book alone was that these 3 important UFO sightings occurred within 3 orbits on the D15 experiment timetable. Mm-hmm. And that there is verification in the voice transcripts and in the technical debriefing that they took an image of, there was only one anomaly, and we took that anomaly in the D15 experiment. That was the whole purpose of the first book. That's what you get from it. The second book is, I found the D15 images. I obtained 16,000 copies at the highest definition. Seth, and that's why Seth's here. Seth's such a great computer operator that he's the only person that can take these tremendous high definition photos and get them to you and get them to anyone else who's going to join in on participating in solving this mystery.
And so you're
Not yes.
so under our nose though was a report to Congress, essentially to the Senate.
Right, because we found these UFOs, the UFOs that I showed you right here. And not only that, but the report to Congress matches these images together. So there you see the lithograph, there you see the D15 footage, and then in the back you have the experiment that contributes to matching all of these things together so that they are the same image with statistical certainty. But again, just because I don't want to get away from it, kids, when you go out there and you want to be a contributor to this UFO field, this is just an example of what you can find. You will see right here just 2 pages out of the 20-some pages of the Gemini mission report, and it has the number of copies of that mission report. Okay. But the number of copies they got, the executive officer of the MOL program, SAPFL, attention Colonel Richard L. Dennon, headquarters, U.S. Air Force, the Pentagon Room 5E417, Washington, D.C. 20301. He got 1 copy. We've got 500, we have 188 different addresses. Some of them are the McDonald's aircraft. You've got names, you've got addresses, you've got people who were receiving all of these thousands and thousands of pages of documents. It's a miracle that I happened upon this one lithograph. I'm sure that there's not going to be another one come up easily or readily. I believe. Oh, and then here's the other thing, okay? And you simply have to understand the importance of what this research is going to show you. If you read the transcripts, 2-hour interview with Richard Underwood, who is the man who set up all these photographs for Sequence Sheet, guess what? Nobody out there has ever seen an actual NASA photograph. First generation. He describes in detail. It's printed here. I could read it to you, but I'll let you read it yourself. In the transcripts, no one has ever seen more than a 3rd generation copy. He details exactly how he was the one who developed it, and he developed it by hand because they were too precious to develop in a machine. He could stop it by hand and save the film if anything went wrong. He developed them by hand, and also all these photographs are not on the kind of film that everybody thinks they are. Guess what? He tells you that the film actually used in the cameras was the thickness of saran wrap. So when it comes time for Congress to determine whether they've got the actual original negatives, which are still in storage and in hiding, I believe, in Building 8, in the cold storage there, that was the last place I found it. It might be somewhere else now. But anyways, if Congress wants to know whether they're seeing the original footage, is it the thickness of saran wrap, or do you see the first master copy made on thick film, and then the second master copy that they made for dissemination to others? And nobody, you or me or anyone else, has ever seen anything more than the first generation copy.
That's disheartening, Ed. It's
no, it's not disheartening. It's explanatory. It's explanatory, just the extent of secrecy that they have to go through. I mean, there's a lot of secrets here. You'll read also in the transcripts of Richard Underwood, he got in trouble, and they almost threatened to shoot him again because they told him that all the photos that they had released had been declassified, and that he was to answer the people. I think it was Aviation Weekly. He called it Av Weekly. He says they want to answer. They want to have questions about all this film, and they said we've declassified it. It's all released. Answer their questions. And so they asked him a question. They said, "What are these circular things here?" And he told them exactly what they were. He says, "Well, that's the proof that the Soviet Union is abrogating the SALT treatment or SALT agreement." Okay, those are nuclear silos that they're building right now in opposition to the SALT agreement. They went crazy against him. But like he said, they told him it was okay. So these things are in these transcripts.
Well, before we move on, though, Ed, I want to make sure that we get the message across, that you get your message across about what you find to be the most important thing regarding the work that you've provided. I mean, it has to be more than just you found an anomaly in Gemini on the Gemini 11 mission, but the bigger picture that you've and the bigger box of Pandoras that you've opened up it brings forward all kinds of new issues. And so, what do you think the most important thing is for our audience to know about the intensive work that you've done?
The most important thing I think that can be done for you to know is this. It's a matter of life and death. We're not going to find the original photos that everybody hopes to find there. They're just simply sat on too tightly. And there's a good reason for it. These guys risk their lives, and they're not going to let these secrets get away from them. But what I am showing you now is that you can, through scientific analysis, prove, that there is evidence, and you can use artificial intelligence, even with all its flaws, to make mathematical evaluations of what are actually in the photos that they didn't know in 1966 would be testable. These photos that I have, the tests that you see being run by AI, the statistical analysis, the high degree of certainty that they bring out shows that you don't have to go and find those actual photos. Go through the records of what we got. And as I said, I'm not really anybody, I'm pretty good at what I do. I'm an excellent historian. I have a mind that just won't shut down along with my mouth, as you can see. But you can find that in these photos is a treasure trove of anomalies. Like Seth was saying, I've got photos in the book and a whole analysis of the voice transcripts from Gemini X. And you can see the blown up UFOs there, and the portholes are also visible there also. Computer analysis is what Mike Gold said to do in the last hearing last summer. Mike Gold says we need to go through the available evidence that's already there. And if we do that and do the proper scientific analysis, we will be able to make determinations that we can't argue with. I'm just presenting this to you.
Ed, how can people obtain or gain access to the information that you have?
I might field that one. I've actually got a nice little summarizer video of the state of the investigation so far on my YouTube channel. You can link it for your audience if you please. It kind of goes over some of the more striking details about the case. And there's a link to a Google Drive repository with some of the primary sources and the most notable of the D15 frames in the description.
Wonderful.
Ed,
Seth, I appreciate you being here tonight. I'm sure we could spend hours upon hours talking about just the Gemini 11 case. And Ed, you're a treasure trove of information and a wealth of knowledge. And I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate both of you being here to talk about this, because from my perspective, it is really important for us to know that these kinds of processes are taking place behind the scenes, that the reality that we perceive isn't necessarily considerate of all the input that could be used to create the true reality. In other words, things are clearly being hidden from us. And I truly appreciate, Ed, your work and the extent to which you have gone to show that something really highly strange occurred during that Gemini 11 mission. There's no question about it.
Well, that's great. I appreciate the opportunity you're giving everybody out there to participate in this search. I've made some mistakes. Don't hold it against me. But the things that I've found will blow your mind. The pictures that you're going to see will blow your mind. The experiments that were conducted are unbelievable. The sigma levels of surety assigned mathematically to these studies is very high. And I'm glad for the chance for people to participate in this. I just want someone to look at it and validate what they can. When I'm wrong, I admit it. Who's the wonderful, we have a new photographer that worked with Richard Nolan and did actually the graphics for his movie. Yeah, what's his name? Yeah, we just said, I'll get it wrong, Brandenburg or something. He's a wonderful guy, and Mark, forgive me. You know how I am, anyways. I'd rather get it wrong and then ask for forgiveness later.
Well,
just
I
wanted to get it
appreciate
out
you
there.
being, I appreciate you being here, Ed.
He just proved one of the photos to me was absolutely a reflection, and he did it so easily. I am not a computer expert. I'm lucky to do this. Yeah. Okay. So how do you say it?
Brabant.
Mark Brabant. Yeah, Mark Brabant. A beautiful website too. You should see the artwork that he does. But as I said, he's worked with Richard Nolan on his movies, and he just proved to me in one moment.
We welcome insight from anybody.
But he proved me wrong. But he did it so simply. I have to work so hard to get anything to do. Yeah.
Well, I will make certain to include a link, Seth, to your YouTube channel so they can get some additional details. And I want to make sure that my audience is able to at least have a pathway that leads them to obtaining Ed's materials.
There are 16,000 images that have to be analyzed. I couldn't analyze them all. There are amazing things going on. This television camera, there are sequences in there where something is distorting the electromagnetic field so violently that it's like a scene from The Outer Limits. If anyone remembers that old TV show, we control
Some
the volume.
Ed.
My God, the camera was going crazy. Something was happening out there in outer space. I can't do all that. I'm old. I just want to go home and take a nap. But you guys can.
I appreciate it, Ed. I do, and I tell you, I'll have you on again, and we'll talk some more about this and some more about your investigations and your work.
I'll be more cogent. This is actually my bedtime. I live out here on the East Coast, and so I haven't been as clear as I would have liked to have been.
Yeah.
But let me tell everybody, this is not a scam. This is not something done ever. I'm not a hypocrite. Yeah, I'd like to get a couple bucks. Who wouldn't? But the importance of this document is that it's just like a smoking gun, and you can prove it with science. And that's all I've ever believed. You're never going to find what they've buried.
It's only the latest and the most impressive in a long series of fascinating UFO.
Yes, and more of it just keeps coming out. Thanks again. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. And I'll be back in a few moments with some afterthoughts.
You are not alone. Thousands of people all over the world have sightings of UFOs per month. MUFON is the place to report them. Since 1969, MUFON has been investigating UFO reports and providing this information to the public. Our aim is the scientific study of UFOs for the benefit of humanity. Support UFO research. Join MUFON today.
Our thanks to Ed Wilson and Seth Lemoncusa for speaking with us today, and especially for the fine, meticulous work Ed has done to prove not only that the crew of Gemini 11 encountered an unidentified object in space in 1966, but that NASA has been encountering these objects for decades and hiding that fact from the public. That became even more important this week when the U.S. House of Representatives held a hearing on unidentified anomalous phenomena, hearing a stunning array of testimony from military personnel and journalist George Knapp, unveiling decades of alleged government secrecy, whistleblower retaliation, and encounters with advanced non-human technologies. Chairman Luna set the tone for the hearing, asserting that the issue was not science fiction, but concerned national security, government accountability, and the American people's right to the truth.
Good morning and welcome to the hearing regarding UAP disclosures. For too long, the issue of unidentified anomalous phenomena, commonly known as UAPs, has been shrouded in secrecy, stigma, and in some cases, outright dismissal. Today, I want to state clearly that this is not science fiction or creating speculation. This is about national security, government accountability, and the American people's right to the truth.
Witnesses provided first-hand accounts of UAPs displaying capabilities far beyond current human understanding. Former Air Force officer Jeffrey Nusatelli detailed multiple incidents at Vandenberg Air Force Base, including a massive glowing red square silently hovering over 2 missile defense sites.
The incursions began on October 14, 2003, when Boeing contractors reported a massive glowing red square silently hovering over 2 missile defense sites. After several minutes, it drifted further east onto the base and vanished over the hills. This event, now known as the Vandenberg Red Square, was referenced by Representative Luna at the first hearing on this topic. Official Air Force records of this event are in possession by Aero and the FBI.
Navy Senior Chief Operations Specialist Alexandro Wiggins described a self-luminous tic-tac-shaped object emerging from the ocean off Southern California, which, along with 3 other objects, disappeared simultaneously with a highly synchronized, near-instantaneous acceleration.
On the evening of February 15th, 2023, at approximately 19:15 PST, in the Whiskey 291 warning area off the coast of Southern California, I was serving on board USS Jackson. During that period, I moved between the Interior Communications Center, ICC-1, and the bridge wing, correlating the sensor picture with visual observations, part of my routine responsibilities for surface and air picture management. What I observed and what our crew recorded was not consistent with conventional aircraft or drones as they appear on our system. A self-luminous tic-tac-shaped object emerged from the ocean before linking up with 3 other similar objects. The 4 then disappeared simultaneously with a high synchronized, near instantaneous acceleration. I observed no sonic boom and no conventional propulsion signatures, no exhaust plume, no control surface articulation on the Sapphire image system. Shortly after the synchronized departure, radar tracks dropped. These observations were multi-sensor and recorded inside of ICC-1 with time location overlay visible in our source frames that have been made public by journalists.
Air Force veteran Dylan Borland testified to seeing an approximately 100-foot equilateral triangle craft at Langley Air Force Base that interfered with the telephone and rapidly ascended silently.
During the summer of 2012, my team was on standby for weather, and I returned to my barracks on base, and at approximately 0130, I saw an approximately 100-foot equilateral triangle take off from near the NASA hangar on the base. The craft interfered with my telephone, did not have any sound, and the material it was made of appeared fluid or dynamic. I was under this triangular craft for a few minutes, and then it rapidly ascended to commercial jet level in seconds, displaying 0 kinetic disturbance, sound, or wind displacement. Some years after that experience, I was further exposed to classified information from the UAP Legacy Crash Retrieval Program through a sensitive position I held within a special access program. During this time, intelligence officers approached me in fear for their own careers, citing misconduct within these programs and similar retaliation that I was already enduring at this time.
A particularly striking piece of evidence was a video presented by Congressman Burleson showing an MQ-9 drone tracking an orb off Yemen, where a Hellfire missile launched at the object bounced right off, and the orb continued to move. Investigative reporter George Knapp delivered chilling revelations from classified Russian UAP documents he obtained, including an October 1982 incident at a Russian ICBM base where UFOs activated missile launch codes, bringing the world to within a few seconds of World War III.
There was an incident in October of 1982 over an ICBM base where UFOs popped up, was observed over this base where the missiles are pointed at us, United States. These UFOs perform incredible maneuvers. They split apart, they fuse back together, they'd appear and disappear, and right at the end of this 4-hour period, the launch control codes for the ICBMs lit up. Something entered the correct codes. The missiles were fired up and ready to launch, and they could not shut it down. The Russian officers were panicking. The UFOs they disappeared. The launch control system goes back to normal. Colonel Sokolov and his team came in, took the thing apart, could not figure out what it was. It wasn't a power surge or EMPs or some of the baloney excuses that our country has given for similar events involving our nuclear missiles. They thought it was a message from wherever the UFOs were from. And that's a chilling thing. I mean, we were a couple of seconds away from World War III starting, and the UFOs were responsible for it.
The credibility of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office was questioned, with Borland stating their public pronouncements were a misrepresentation of the truth.
At the end of March 2023, I agreed to meet with AARO following the suggestion of other federal officials believing it was what our nation required of me. I had reservations with AARO due to assessments they were reporting publicly at the time as a misrepresentation of the truth.
The human cost of UAP secrecy was a central theme, with Borland detailing deliberate obstruction and sustained reprisals over a decade, including medical malpractice, blacklisting, and manipulation of security clearances.
Because of my direct knowledge of the reality of certain legacy UAP programs, my professional career was deliberately obstructed, and I have endured sustained reprisals from government agencies for over a decade. These issues include medical malpractice committed by Veterans Affairs staff, denial of work I performed while enlisted in the United States Air Force, forged and manipulated employment documents, workplace harassment, including colleagues being directed to not speak with me, manipulation of my security clearance by certain agencies, blocking, delaying, and ultimately removing my ability to be employed within the IC.
Joe Spielberger of the Project on Government Oversight highlighted the vital role of whistleblowers and the severe personal risks they undertake.
Whistleblowers continue to play a vital role during both Democratic and Republican administrations. They help Congress and the public identify and understand what government corruption looks like. Their disclosures fuel investigations and allow us to address wrongdoing and hold those responsible to account. That's why historically there's been a strong bipartisan consensus in Congress to support and protect whistleblowers. Doing so protects the country and ensures our government is more responsive and accountable to the people.
Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle expressed frustration over government overclassification and a lack of transparency, advocating for the passage of the UAP Whistleblower Protection Act and the UAP Disclosure Act to ensure accountability and safeguard those who bravely come forward. If you have the time, the inclination, or the intellectual stamina, consider the implications of all of this. 10 years ago, UFOs were a joke. This week, a United States congressman introduced video showing a UFO surviving a direct Hellfire missile attack. Who or what can do that? Many years ago, attorney Daniel Sheehan predicted that UFOs would become a major public policy issue. That prediction has clearly come to fruition. There is no question that all of this evidence, including the evidence Ed Wilson so meticulously wrung from the NASA archives, speaks to a greater truth. We are not alone, and we have never been alone. But who are they? What are they? Where are they from? What do they want? How many theys are there? What do we really know about them? Someone, or at least a small group of people somewhere, have the answers to many of these questions. They just don't want to share it with the rest of us, for one reason or another. Without further reliable information, we can only speculate. Considering human nature, I think it's safe to assume the worst. We all know from watching science fiction that in the future, when we are dominated by whatever corporation or conglomeration of corporations that gains control of the alien technology, that we will all be essentially wearing the same outfits, like Winston Smith and his compatriots in George Orwell's 1984. I hope that our uniforms are not so outwardly drab. I would at least like them to be comfortable. I certainly hope they don't put us in liquid-filled tubes like they did in The Matrix. Thank you for joining us once again here for the official MUFON podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time right here on the official MUFON podcast.